So welcome to Activate, Collaborate, and Educate, Health Outreach and Programming in Your Community. My name is Jared Irwin. I'm the Consumer Health Coordinator with the network of the National Library of Medicine's Southeastern Atlantic region. I'm headquartered at the University of Maryland in the city of Baltimore. So I'm so happy that you're joining us today, and I'm looking forward to discussing some of the great programming ideas and outreach opportunities that exist even in this very unusual time that we are all living in right now. So just a few housekeeping details before we get started. I encourage you to enter any questions or comments that you have into the chat box. And when you do that, make sure that you have selected all participants in the drop-down menu. That makes sure that I and everybody else can see what you are saying. We will have live closed captioning for this webinar. And see, I believe we have a link that we can drop into the chat that will take you to the live captioning page in a web browser. So that's available if you need it. During the next hour, I will be asking a few questions in the chat box. And you can use the chat box to share your thoughts about those questions. There is a full resource list with links to everything that we are going to be discussing, all of the programs and some of the different resources that we talk about here. So that list is going to be on the course page for this course, and I believe we can put a link in the chat to that as well. So I'll be referring to that frequently, and I encourage you to consult that resource list after the webinar if you want to investigate anything that we talk about in a little bit more detail. This session is being recorded. In 1 or 2 weeks from today, we will have the recording posted on NNLM's YouTube channel. And once that happens, I will email everyone with a link to the recording of the webinar. This course is eligible for 1 credit hour of continuing education credit from the Medical Library Association, and it also applies to the Consumer Health Information Specialization, or the CHIS, which is also from NLA. And at the end of the webinar, we will have some information about how to claim that credit. So before we get started, I'd love to hear from you just to say where you are located and what kind of library you're working at, just because I always love to see where people are tuning in from. And yeah, I see that we have some people who are already chiming in. We've got Akron, Ohio. We have Indiana, Florida, yeah, New Jersey, all over the place. That's great to see. All right. Yeah, so thank you so much to everybody who's joining in, wherever you are joining in from. And I look forward to spending the next hour with you talking about some of these programming and outreach opportunities. All right, so before we dive in, I want to mention just a couple of resources related to COVID-19, because this is still a very important topic to know about, and it's very much on the minds of our communities. So I want to mention these at the start here. The National Library of Medicine and NNLM are directing any public health questions to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and specifically their website, coronavirus.gov, which has a lot of good public-facing information that will be helpful for your community members to learn about the coronavirus and COVID-19. For research information, you can go to the National Institutes of Health's webpage about the coronavirus, which is nih.gov/coronavirus. I know that many people who are joining us today may be educators or library staff who are currently working remotely or whose institutions are still facing restrictions about in-person programming. So we will be looking at both some in-person options for when that becomes possible to do in-person programming, as well as some virtual options as well. Right. So I want to give just a little bit of context about where NNLM fits in to some of the different organizations and names you might have heard. I think many of us have heard of the National Institutes of Health, which is the nation's leading medical research agency. You might have heard of specific institutes within the NIH, such as the National Institute for Allergy and Infectious Disease. And one of the other institutes within NIH is the National Library of Medicine. And the NLM is the world's largest biomedical library, which maintains and makes available a large print collection and also produces electronic information resources like Medline Plus, which we will be looking at later in this hour. Now, the network of the National Library of Medicine is an outreach and education program of NLM. The NNLM is made up of 8 geographic regions. I am from the Southeastern Atlantic region, which serves 10 states, as well as the District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. We're headquartered at the University of Maryland in Baltimore. So at NNLM, our mission is to provide equal access to biomedical information to health professionals, as well as providing access to quality health information for the general public, so that our communities are better able to make informed decisions about their health. We do this through resources that we provide on our website, through the funding of health education projects, in-person trainings when that is possible to do, and webinars, just like this one. So here is our agenda for the next hour. We're going to start out by looking at some health programming ideas for summer reading, since I know that many of our partners in public libraries are thinking ahead to what that's going to look like. Then we'll talk about some other health programming ideas and resources beyond just summer reading to provide some other possible ways to connect our communities with health information. Then we will look at how some libraries have moved to virtual engagement strategies, since many libraries are still closed or have restricted in-person activity due to COVID-19. And then finally, we will talk briefly about getting your community involved with citizen science. And Citizen Science Month is coming up in April, so this is a great time to be thinking about the possibilities that citizen science provides. Okay, so we'll start off by looking at some health programming for summer reading. And before we start, I would love to hear from you in the chat. What comes to mind when you think about health programming in summer libraries? And that can be connected to summer reading programs or other types of programming. What do you think? Let me know in the chat. Okay, yeah, I'm seeing nutrition, fitness, see heat stroke awareness, yeah, mental health issues. Yeah, those are all very important topics. Sun protection. See health behaviors, healthy eating, yeah, vaccine education. That's certainly a timely topic. Hydration, cancer screening. Yeah, thank you for those suggestions. Those are all really important examples of ways that we can connect our communities with health information. And it's always great to hear about the work that our communities are already doing, because there's certainly a wide range of activities that are already happening. All right. So, for those not familiar, the Collaborative Summer Library Program, it's a consortium of states and island nations that work together to provide libraries around the country with a shared summer reading theme and supporting materials for that theme. These materials can include professional artwork, promotional items, activities, evidence-based instruction manuals, and materials for audiences of all ages, from pre-readers up through adults. Every year, 16,000 public libraries participate in the programming provided by the Collaborative Summer Library Program, and they host summer reading programs based on these materials. So I wanted to give just a quick heads up about what the next theme for the summer reading program will be. It'll be Tales and Tales. This theme is going to involve programming that looks at our animal friends as a way of exploring health topics. Now, the exact program plans that will be available around this theme are still currently a work in progress, but I did want to at least put this on your radar. In the meantime, you can find information about previous year's programs on NNLM's website. So we'll look at some of these programs that were created for last year's summer reading theme, just to give you an idea of the sorts of resources you might find. So in 2020, the theme that we had for CSLP was Imagine Your Story. We focused on programs relating to topics like fairy tale nutrition, nature walks. We had programming about like the tooth fairy and dental health story times, and more topics like that that connect health with some fantasy and folklore and fairy tales. So today we'll take a close look at the programs that were developed by staff at the NNLM for 2020's program, and just to give an idea about the kinds of resources that we try to make available through this collaboration with CSLP. Now, for dental health and a visit from the tooth fairy. This was a program meant to promote children's dental health with help from the tooth fairy and from local partners, such as dentists. The network of the National Library of Medicine has suggested some of the following activities connected with this theme. We had one program idea exploring how different cultures experience tooth loss with a great book called Throw Your Tooth on the Roof, Tooth Traditions from Around the World. Some of the other programs in this theme were offering simple crafts using coloring pages from the American Dental Association's Mouth Healthy website. Some other options included using a puppet of an animal that had large teeth, like a shark, and using a toothbrush to demonstrate good brushing habits, and incorporating that into a story time or a song. Another program idea we had was Into the Woods, which relates to environmental engagement. For this program, we can connect it with literature such as Little Red Riding Hood or Hansel and Gretel, which embrace both the pleasures and dangers of nature. You can use environmental engagement programs to encourage things like citizen science. You can teach about hiking safety, or just explore nature's meditative and health benefits. So here are some of the activities that were developed along this theme. You can develop a citizen science story walk. If your library has a walking club, or if there's a walking club or something similar in your community, you could consider adding a citizen science twist to that. Citizen science basically is public participation in ongoing scientific research. There are different citizen science organizations that have apps and websites that allow individuals to record nature observations while they're out on these walks or other programs that happen out in nature. Another idea is hiking safety. So what is safe or dangerous to eat in nature? So there are mushrooms, berries, and bark, among other things, and it can be tough to know what's safe and what's potentially hazardous. So you can consider partnering with hiking or nature enthusiasts in your community. You could also partner with conservatories or even local parks departments. This program can also be expanded to include literature like Little Red Riding Hood, as well as some first aid tips like tick prevention, how to avoid getting bitten by ticks, and what to do if you happen to be bitten by a tick. And then one other program in this vein is forest bathing. And this is a form of nature therapy that started in Japan in the 1980s. Basically, forest bathing is taking the time to connect with nature as a way of improving your health and emotional wellness. So, for example, are your patrons stressed out? Does it seem like they're becoming a little bit screen addicted, maybe? Then you could consider a program like this. And this is another great opportunity to partner with hiking enthusiasts, conservatories, or parks as well. Next up is fairy tale nutrition. Fairy tales and folklore are bursting with food references, from poisoned apples to magic beans. You can take food and nutrition to a fantasy level with story time programs, cooking, and or gardening activities. So one example of that is Fairy Tale Nutrition Storytime. You can host a storytime program or series that are inspired by food from fairy tales, including the giant turnip, the giant carrot, the princess and the pea, or Jack and the beanstalk. You can also pair that with nonfiction books about nutrition or the life cycles of seeds. And you can even use art activities, which might include creating pictures or other art with beans or seeds. Another option would be having a fairy tale garden. If you have an existing community garden, you could plant crops that connect to some popular fairy tales. So you can grow those giant carrots or peas for a princess, or even some magic beans. If you don't have a similar garden along those lines, you can scale it down. So for example, beans can be grown in a 5-gallon container as long as their vines have something that they can climb on. So for this activity, you can enlist children and teens to make signage for the garden, which can include some of the connections with fantasy literature or alternately with scientific information about the plants. And you can share information about the life cycle of the plants that you are growing here. Now there is also the Healthy Eating Cookbook Club. Using stories like Jack and the Beanstalk or Stone Soup as inspiration, you can host a cooking program that focuses on beans as a healthy source of protein. You can discuss bean and seed life cycles and share the benefits of having a healthy amount of fiber in your diet. And that can include information from Medline Plus and other resources. You could also share a one-pot bean soup recipe, or if in-person events start to become possible again, you could scale it up and even host a healthy chili cook-off challenge for your community. All right, another option that we've included in past summer reading programs is the Graphic Medicine Book Club, focused on veteran stories in particular. This book club program uses graphic novels about veterans to explore veterans' experiences and their health. A couple good examples of titles from this program include At War with Yourself and When I Returned. One of the nice things about using graphic medicine for programs like this is that research suggests we are better at understanding information presented in visual forms, such as comics, rather than just having things explained to us. Stories can be more engaging than just receiving factual information alone. So as a result of that, it can be much easier to remember and, importantly, empathize with someone and the things that they have experienced rather than just receiving facts and data. Graphic medicine combines visual storytelling and health information, which creates a unique opportunity for readers to experience and learn about healthcare through comics. So for this program, you can consider partnering with a local veterans organization. They might even be able to recommend a local veteran who would be willing to be a guest speaker or a guest story reader for one of your programs. Okay, next, if Harry Potter is still popular at your library, there are a couple of program plans with Harry Potter-themed activity ideas. So one of these is an exhibition kit that's prepared by the National Library of Medicine. That is Renaissance, Science, Magic, and Medicine in Harry Potter's world. The magic that's in the Harry Potter series is partially based on Renaissance traditions that played an important role in the development of Western science, including things like alchemy and natural philosophy. So the NLM has an exhibition on this very topic. It explores the intersections of all these different Renaissance ideas, and it also examines some of the ethical topics that are raised by these things, such as the desire for knowledge, the effects of prejudice, and the responsibility that comes with power. There are other educational resources that are part of the online version of this exhibition as well. And these include a couple of coloring books, which are the Garden of Health coloring book and the Patronus coloring book. And there are also lesson plans to use with this as well. Alternately, there is also a program called Herbology in Harry Potter, Ginger, Peppermint, and Valerian, which is a great way to introduce the topic of herbs and supplements. And some of the topics and activities that can be covered in this program include making soap or bath bombs, or you can also use it as a chance to have focused book club discussions about some of these topics. Okay, now this program was first developed a couple of years ago, but it sure does still seem current. This program plan is a story time centered around germs and washing our hands. So you could consider buying microbe plush toys or cutting out silhouettes of viruses or bacteria from construction paper to show the shapes of some common germs and viruses. And there are some good book suggestions that go along with this as well, which include both fiction and nonfiction. So the titles Sick Simon and Tiny Creatures, the World of Microbes are great choices for this. If this works in the space that you have, you can also check out instructions for 2 demonstrations or games on the importance of hand washing. While important for obvious reasons, it feels like something to keep in your back pocket for another time and place perhaps when in-person programming becomes a little bit more feasible. All right, so if you visit our website and look at some of these summer reading programs, or if you have ideas about other types of health-related summer reading programs you'd like to see in the future, NNLM would love to hear from you about that. The link on this slide is available on our summer reading page on nnlm.gov, and it allows you to give us that feedback. So I'll show you where to find that on our website. This is a quick look at the NNLM home page. You can find the summer reading page on the initiatives menu. It's at the very bottom of the initiatives menu on our home page, nnlm.gov. So that will connect you to information about all of the programs that we've just talked about, and it will also allow you to give us feedback about what you might like to see in future programs. All right, so next we're going to take a look at some health information resources and some other programming ideas that go beyond just summer reading. So to start with, we will take a look at Medline Plus. Now, if you've taken webinars from NNLM before, you likely know all about this resource. You can think of Medline Plus as a health information Google. It has information about health topics on all kinds of important issues like asthma, cancer, diabetes, and much more. You can also find information about drugs and supplements, information about clinical trials, and far more beyond that, even things like lab tests and genetics. And there are a lot of good resources within this site so that it's not only these articles that you look at. There are also videos, health quizzes, and games that are included as part of this. You can find information about Medline Plus magazine, which you can order a subscription to for your library. And it also has information in other languages. There is a Spanish language version of Medline Plus as well, which can be very helpful if you have Spanish speakers in your communities. Now, Medline Plus links to trusted resources across many different government agencies, research institutes, and universities. And these include the National Institutes of Health, the Mayo Clinic, and the Nemours Foundation. And best of all, there are no advertisements or endorsements. The information on Medline Plus will not steer you toward using one treatment versus another, and it will not try to encourage you to purchase any product that might be health-related. So that source of bias is not present in Medline Plus. Let's see, I see a question in the chat here. A patron wanted information on causes of inflammation. Search on Medline Plus gave too many results. I wanted to browse the most recent ones, and the search results did not provide the pub date until I clicked on each article link. Your thoughts? Yeah, that's a good question. I guess in a situation like that, I might try to talk with the patron a little more about whether there are specific conditions that they might be curious about with regard to the causes of inflammation. That might be a way to narrow it down a little bit more, and from there make it a little bit easier to sort through the information that's there and to make sure that it's current. But yeah, it can be tricky for general questions like that, where there could be a large number of possible causes for the symptom that somebody is asking about. Let's see, we did use Boolean search for heart, but I would like to see an advanced search. Yeah, that's a good point. Medline Plus is designed to be a more simple tool, so I can certainly understand why for people who want to try a more advanced search, it might not be an ideal tool in that respect. So yeah, I thank you for bringing that up. That is one limitation to be aware of with Medline Plus. It is kind of an introductory resource that doesn't have some of those more advanced search features within it. Okay, so next up, we'll take a look at a couple other resources that are part of Medline Plus. One good one to be aware of is the Healthy Recipes section. This can be great if you are considering offering nutrition workshops or cooking programming. So you can find all kinds of different recipes for all sorts of meals and even healthy desserts. The recipe that you see on the right here is for classic honey flan. And this recipe was developed and published by the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, which is part of NIH. So recipes, like all information on Medline Plus, these recipes direct to trusted health resources outside of the National Library of Medicine. So it's pulling in a lot of different reliable kinds of information. Okay, now we'll take a look at some other resources that might be helpful as well if you're thinking about health outreach and education. NNLM and the American Library Association have partnered together through the Libraries Transform public awareness campaign to create a free toolkit for Health Literacy Month, which is observed every October. NNLM and ALA's partnership is meant to create resources so that library professionals can raise awareness of the ways that libraries support health literacy in their communities. The toolkit provides some key messaging, program ideas, and downloadable marketing materials, including bookmark templates and social media graphics. And libraries can use these as they promote health literacy in October and throughout the year. On the screen here, you see some of the example messaging that is included as part of Libraries Transform's Health Literacy Kit. And this campaign, it's designed to educate our communities about the different ways that libraries can support health, because that's not always something that people necessarily connect with libraries. But of course, we have a lot of resources and skills that we can use to provide our communities with health information. So Libraries Transform is a great initiative to educate our communities about that aspect of our work. Another nice tool is NNLM's Health Outreach and Programming Guide. You can visit this guide to access materials related to health outreach and programming specifically. And the Programming and Ideas Guide, which I have shown on the screen here, is a list of programs in a box, program resources, examples of past projects that NNLM has supported, and even links to evaluation resources to support your work in health outreach and programming. Let's see. Yeah, in the Creative Tools and Games tab, you can also find a list of resources like comic strips and other activities to get your communities thinking about health and wellness. Any games or worksheets that have already been created can be found on that guide as well. All right, so next I want to talk about Engage for Health, which is a community education program which is designed to improve participants' health literacy. This is a program in a box that was prepared by my colleagues at the Mid-Atlantic region of NNLM, and it's a great way to encourage doctor-patient communication and improve understanding in those situations. And that's really important because a big part of health literacy is knowing how to communicate effectively with healthcare professionals. So this 1-hour flexible program would include everything you need to conduct a program on that topic. It has presentation slides, speaker notes, role-playing scripts, program evaluations, and marketing materials. Another great programming resource that we have is the NNLM Reading Club. And this is a selection of ready-to-use book titles along with downloadable materials that are designed to help libraries support health information needs in their communities. Usually the selections are tied to national health observances. So for example, this month is Heart Health Month, and the titles that were selected focus on heart health and other cardiovascular conditions, including strokes. At this time, NNLM isn't distributing the book kits themselves, but we do still provide downloadable study guides and links to health information on the topics that are discussed in these selections. So here's an example of the types of resources you would find in the Reading Club materials that NNLM prepares. You can find discussion guides for each of the titles that are recommended, and you can also find links to further health information and important health data about the conditions that are being discussed. So this is a great way to dive a little bit deeper into the subject matter of the books that are being discussed. And just to show one example of what that might look like, I have the discussion guide for the book When the Words Suddenly Stopped, which is about a person who is recovering from a stroke. So a really nice thing about these discussion guides is, in addition to talking about the books themselves, they also encourage people to think about ways that they can use this information to take more charge over their own health. So it can be a great way for people to talk about and think about ways that they can improve their own health based on some of the information they might find in connection with these books. All right, next up, I want to talk about graphic medicine, which we discussed briefly a little bit, but it's a really important topic that I think has a lot of potential for high-quality use in programming. So if you already host a book club, this is a great option to explore. As we've seen, graphic medicine combines visual storytelling and medicine, and it creates a unique way for readers to experience and learn about healthcare and experiences with health conditions through comics. And it's a great way to make complex health topics a little bit less daunting for the general public. So it's a great topic to explore if you're looking for book club programming. And in particular, I also want to highlight that there are some excellent Spanish language graphic medicine titles. For example, on the right side of the screen, you can see El Defo, which was a winner of a Newbery honor for children's literature. So there are some really high quality graphic medicine titles in Spanish as well. And yeah, this is a topic that we are very passionate about here at NNLM, and yeah, we support it a lot and think it has a lot of potential to benefit your programming. Now, earlier I mentioned the Harry Potter exhibition that the National Library of Medicine organizes. And that's just one example of some of the traveling exhibitions that NLM offers. These are made available free of charge to public, university, and medical libraries. The only cost to you would be the cost of shipping the materials. These traveling exhibitions are comprised of banners that you can stand up in your space. There are usually 6 of them. And they contain information about different aspects of the topic at hand. And they also have complementary information that's available online. So these banners and these exhibitions provide an opportunity for other programming related to the topic, and they can also highlight your services and selections, your collections of materials on these topics. So in addition to these traveling exhibitions, there are permanent online exhibitions that are enhanced by different kinds of educational resources for both teachers and students in grades K through 12. And there are also resources that are appropriate for college and university level audiences. These include extensive lesson plans from multiple disciplines, ranging from history to science. All right, so one of the exhibitions that I like to highlight here is the one on graphic medicine. It introduces a lot of opportunities for different kinds of programming and activities related to different ways of communicating health information through comics. So I want to walk through an example of what one library did with this particular exhibit. The University of Pittsburgh's Health Sciences Library hosted this exhibit a couple of years ago. And they used it as an example, they used it as an opportunity to bring in some special guest speakers. So that can be a great way to get your community engaged in a different way of understanding health information. And yeah, they also introduced different possible activities and other ways to engage their community in learning about this topic. So here are a couple of the banners that are available as part of this exhibition. So it has information from the perspective of graphic medicine artists, and it also walks through some of the different ways that using graphic medicine can communicate health information, including through being able to use pictures and visual metaphors and other aspects of visual storytelling that aren't always possible when you're presenting information in other formats. Okay, I see a question in the chat. Are these exhibitions also available to public libraries? Yes, they are. To find out which exhibitions are available for applications to host them, you can go to the National Library of Medicine's website, and they'll have information about what dates any given exhibit is available to request and have at your institution. So yeah, it's definitely something that is available to public libraries and can be really valuable for that audience. Okay, and one other activity that was used at Pitt was this station where people can create their own short graphic medicine items. And this one was prepared by a medical school student at Pitt. And this talks about hemochromatosis, which basically means the body has too much iron in it. And the way they depicted that was showing the red blood cells here in the first panel. And as there's more and more iron in the body, the red blood cells start lifting these little iron weights, which is a really clever way of showing the body working hard to handle all this extra iron that it finds itself with, until eventually in this last panel they are just overwhelmed and not able to work. So this was a really cute example that I'm very fond of. Okay, a comment in the chat that says, please note, traveling exhibition services are currently on hold due to public health restrictions. Yes, that is correct, and thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, until COVID-19 is under control a little bit better and we're able to have more in-person programming, these exhibitions are on hold. So yes, thank you for mentioning that. Okay, some other resources that can be valuable include the National Institute on Aging's resources about exercise and healthy living throughout all stages of life. Now you might recognize some of these resources from a previous standalone website that we used to promote called Go for Life. That website doesn't exist as a standalone resource anymore, but much of the information is still available from the National Institute on Aging. So they have lots of great resources about safe ways to exercise for older adults and motivational tips to get started with it. The National Institute on Aging also provides some publications that you can either download or order print copies of free of charge from NIA, including this booklet called Get Fit for Life. So this can be a really helpful and valuable resource to make available to your communities as well, if you're interested in programming around exercise and fitness. Another set of programs in a similar vein comes from an organization called Let's Move in Libraries. Now this is an international initiative to get people of all ages and ability levels moving. It aims to support healthy communities, and to help do this, they put on programs including story walks, yoga classes, gardens, the circulation of fitness equipment, and much more beyond that. Through Let's Move in Libraries, public libraries can answer the call to action about some of the health needs in their communities surrounding physical fitness. There is also a newsletter that you can subscribe to stay up to date about what's happening with this program and new programming ideas that are developed. And one other helpful resource within Let's Move in Libraries that I'll highlight are some sample liability forms. If you're talking about activities involving physical fitness and moving around, this is an important thing to think about. So they provide liability forms so that if somebody is accidentally hurt during the programming, that your library will have protection from that and not have to worry about possible legal consequences from that. So that's one good resource to be aware of in Let's Move in Libraries. All right, next up, I'm guessing a lot of you are familiar with Programming Librarian. This website provides a lot of different resources, connections, and opportunities for libraries to fill their role as the centers of cultural and civic life in their communities. It is a place where library professionals can share, learn, and be inspired to present excellent programming. This resource includes a lot of different kinds of programming, including those related to health. And these can include information such as the description of the program, some example images and photos, promotional materials, and a lot more beyond that. The idea is just to create a central source of program ideas so librarians can build upon one another's good work. All right, next up, I'll talk about Jayberry. You might have encountered Jayberry if you work in children's or youth services at a library in particular. This is a Storytime website and blog run by 2 librarians in Canada. This webpage is a great resource for children's library staff who are looking for new routines, tricks to use in their programming, and songs. They've also compiled a list of story times that are being streamed online. Now, there are also health and fitness-related YouTube playlists in Jayberry with sections on songs about body parts, emotions and feelings, and movement and dancing-related story times as well. The website also has resources for bilingual story times, too. All right, and next I'll touch briefly on Digital Learn. We know that health and digital literacy are connected, and that many of the best and certainly most up-to-date health information sources live online. So Digital Learn is a free resource for promoting digital literacy in your library, both in person and virtually. In addition to hosting tools and resources for educators, there are modules that anyone can participate in remotely. This might be a challenge to offer digitally if your goal is to reach members of your community who are not as comfortable with virtual programming to start with. But it can still be a valuable way to connect members of your community to the full range of health information that exists online. All right, next up, I want to talk about some specifically virtual engagement programs. Because in light of COVID-19, a lot of our institutions have restrictions on in-person programming, including not being able to put them on at all in some cases. So I want to look at some examples about some of the different programs librarians have implemented in the past year to address this. As I mentioned, Jayberry has a great list of streamed Storytime programs, and that has been one of the most common programs that I've seen move over to digital formats in the last year. And many of these are conducted over social media, particularly Facebook Live, although Instagram also has a live feature that I've seen used as well. And YouTube and Vimeo are also options for live streaming if those platforms are more comfortable for you. So there's a wealth of information about Storytimes moving online, and Jayberry gives you a chance to learn about what your colleagues are doing in that area. Okay, next up, the Enoch Pratt Free Library, which is the public library system here in Baltimore. They've moved a great deal of their programming online as well. Among their health-related offerings, they have a virtual yoga program that they offer every Wednesday. And they also have virtual meetings with a social worker, with each week being devoted to a specific topic related to a person's overall wellness. Partnering with a social worker can be a great way to connect underserved members of your communities to health services and other social resources. So I'm really happy to see that Pratt has found ways to continue offering those sessions virtually. All right, next up, last year the Carnegie Library at Pittsburgh had a virtual reading challenge called Stay In and Read. They used a summer reading software program called Beanstack to run it, but there are also less high-tech ways to organize these kinds of challenges as well. So that can be one option if you're looking at virtual programming. Another really innovative one that I've seen is the Digital Escape Room. Youth librarians at Peters Township Public Library in Pennsylvania created a Hogwarts-themed digital escape room using Google Forms. If you're not familiar with escape rooms, they're usually an in-person themed adventure game. So these can give practice with problem solving, critical thinking skills, and they can also be used to educate participants about a specific subject. Another small library last year posted a video of a staff member touring their closed library while puppets were set up in the places where library staff normally work. It was a short, cute little video for library regulars who were really missing their library space. So it was just a nice kind of engagement strategy to remind people that the library still is there and is still working as a resource for them. So if you are still in your library building, something along the lines of a virtual tour might work for you. It can be a way to give your communities a look inside your library and feel a little more connected to it. If you don't have the time or ability to make content, you may have the option of sharing existing resources. So here I have a screenshot of one of the nature cams from explore.org. There are many places online where anyone in the world can watch live streams from nature or other settings. Sharing out free resources like this can be a low-cost way to engage your patrons and reduce stress. So as you're thinking about virtual programming, it's important to think about accessibility and designing it so that all members of your community can take advantage of these resources. So here I just have a list of a few important things to be aware of. One is is this resource set up so that people who use screen readers or other text-to-voice tools able to participate in it? Another important thing to be aware of is closed captioning for videos or other digital media that you might have. And in addition to that, making sure that you're using color effectively and that you have good contrast on web-based resources so that it's easy for people to read and to understand. If you want to investigate this further, last year SciStarter hosted a webinar by Kelly Ham, who at that time was with the NNLM's Pacific Southwest region. And this webinar was recorded and posted on SciStarter's YouTube page. Kelly covered a lot of design and accessibility techniques, including the ones that we've talked about here. So this could be valuable to check out if you're new to it. All right, so finally, I will take a quick look at some citizen science resources. Citizen Science Month is in April, so this is a great time to think about programming and engagement for your community surrounding citizen science. So some of you might be familiar with this, but others might not. So basically, the 4 key features of citizen science are that anyone can participate, that participants all use the same method of collecting data so that data can be combined, that this data is actually used by scientists to reach real conclusions, and finally, that a wide community of scientists work together and share this data. So another good way of thinking about that is by thinking about what citizen science is not. It is not participating in a medical trial or a social science survey. So we'll look at a couple examples of that as we wrap up here. You might be familiar with the Audubon Bird Guide app, which is one example of a citizen science project. Audubon does annual counts of specific birds, and this is a good way to engage communities in real scientific work. Yeah, there are a lot of local Audubon chapters and bird watching groups, so that could be one valuable source of partnerships if you're thinking about virtual programming. As I mentioned, Citizen Science Month is coming up, and SciStarter is a great resource where you can learn about programming surrounding that. SciStarter is a partner of NNLM, and we've worked with them to identify health-related programming for citizen science activities. There are a lot of fun ongoing projects that could be interesting to members of your community along a wide range of different topics. So SciStarter promotes and supports events all across the country for Citizen Science Month, and they are also willing to lend support for the use of online platforms. And NNLM provides more information about citizen science on this webpage here. So you'll find resources about citizen science events, featured projects that can be completed remotely, and other resources along those lines to support your success with citizen science projects. This is linked in the resource guide on the course page that I had mentioned earlier. To give just a few examples of events that NNLM has endorsed related to citizen science, there are a number that are related to environmental health. So Globe at Night talks about light pollution and tracking the amounts of light that are in the night sky. There are others related to flu, and there are all kinds of other topics included in that as well. So SciStarter is a great place to look if you're wanting to get started with health-related citizen science projects. All right, that is what I have for you today. Thank you so much for your time and attention. Now, as I said at the top of the hour, this webinar is eligible for continuing education credit from the MLA. And you can access that in the evaluation link that Rebecca just posted to the chat. And that will provide information and instructions on claiming the 1 hour of continuing education credit.